Welcome, folks, to Everybot Plus. Thanks for hanging out with us for a little while this morning. We talked about what is Everybot and how do you plus it up. Real quick introductions. Who are we? My name is Brian. I am one of the head coaches of Team 930. This will be my 15th season in FRC. Was in Lego League before that, so around 20 years of first experience, quite a long time. My day job, I am a engineering. Different title on this one. Engineering manager at TAPCO. We make flashing stop signs and other smart traffic products to keep people safe.
My name is Matt. I'm Team M30's design lead this year. I'm entering my third year in FRC, and I'm an intern at STS Technical Services right now.
So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to go over what is the Everybot, in case you haven't heard of this program. Then go over some of the past ones, talk about this year's Everybot from this last year's game, and then talk about how can you use the Everybot as a baseline and then step it up. Talk about some ideas for that, and then go over a quick case study of one of the example teams this year that did that, and then look forward to future of Everybot as well as new FRC, Kit of Parts robot, touch on that just a little bit.
So right from the Robonauts website, Everybot is an affordable, competitive, and elegant robot intended to play the first robotics competition challenge. It's intended to be built with essentially basic tools. Anything you can buy from like Rev, West Coast Products, and any other FRC vendors. It was started by Team 118 in 2014. Back when I first started, it was a little bit different than like your current Everybot style. It was started by making a robot through the entire season. So it was something that they started and then worked through the entire season. And then a couple years ago, back in 2018, they changed it to what it is now, which is what they designed the robot, build it in 1 week, and then release all the materials and the documentation for that. So at this point in 2023, the Everybot is less than $7,100 and is designed to be simple and competitive, not just a minimally competitive concept like some other programs. So it's Everybot overall is really designed to help teams with like a lot of lower like fabrication abilities, right? You know, some teams don't have the advanced machine capabilities that are required to make completely custom like plates, machine parts, right? So it's designed to help with that and alleviate that stress and like barrier to entry.
So a quick look at some of the past Everybots the 118's come out with. So starting on the right side, 2018. So this year's game was taking power cubes, putting them up onto a really big teeter-totter or two smaller teeter-totters, as well as you could pass these cubes, which are just milk crates covered in fabric, push them through the driver station wall, and then get points for putting them into the vault, was what it was called. So you can see in that photo right there, the 2018 Everybot had the ability to get a cube from one of the human player loading stations, get it in the robot, and then that whole arm bucket just flipped over the top of the robot and could dump it into the scale, or excuse me, the switch, the lower teeter-totter on either side. It also had the ability to do the vault, so push game cubes through the hole in the wall, in the side wall. But that was actually a separate mechanism. You can see on the front of that robot, there's those two wheels mounted, there's that cutout in the bumper and in the frame. And so the Everybot could still grab cubes from the ground, shuttle them over, and then reverse those rollers, spit them out. So one of the interesting things about that, right, and the Everybot, right, making it feasible for everyone, is that they wanted to do multiple things, but instead of making a more complicated mechanism, they kept it separate. So it's just one very basic mechanism that just flips up and over, and then another very basic, it's just two wheels and a cutout. Keeping those separate allows the robot to do a little bit more, but it doesn't tie them together and make it more complicated. Jumping over to the other side, 2020, Infinite Recharge. The game that year was foam dodgeballs up into, there was 3 spots to score it. There was a lower portal, there was a big giant hexagon-shaped goal, and then within that was a smaller circle. And you got points 1, 2, or 3, depending on where you would score those. So you can see the Everybot this year was, again, pretty basic of just 2 rollers to intake those power cells, the dodgeballs, and then kind of a hopper on the back of that intake to just store them. So robot could drive around, or it could get and pick up balls off the ground, or it could go up to the human player station and get balls fed in, and then drive up to, you can see in the right-hand side of that photo, the lower port, just reverse your rollers and spit it out. And that was still, not as many points as getting it up into the top. However, it was fast and efficient, and it was easy for teams to be able to just one mechanism. You don't have to deal with an intake, and then how you feed that ball off to maybe a hopper, and then up to an elevator, and then up to a turret, and then up to a shooter. In 2020 especially, those dodgeballs were really grippy, and they'd get stuck, and it was a nightmare. So keeping it simple, but allowing a team to still score points and be a contributing member of the alliance. 2022 is very similar to 2020. It's almost identical, where it's just a roller bar rolls the cargo, those blue and red giant tennis balls, up into the intake, and then it just reverses those out again into that year's logo in order to score points. You can also see at the top there was hanging from bars in 2022, and the Everybot, it was pretty clever, a fully passive hanger. Either you could just drive at it and you kind of wedge yourself up and on to the very lowest bar, or they were spring loaded, where you could drive at it one side and it would flip the hooks up and then do that drive and wedge, where again, it's fully passive. There's no pneumatics or motors up top there. You're just driving your robot on, but able to actually get from the lowest, you could score up on the next highest rung. So the 2023 Everybot, we have the benefit of some hindsight here, but what do you guys think, to get some feedback? What would be the minimum design requirements for this last year's game? Hopefully you guys are familiar with Charged Up, right? Cones and cubes. For the autonomous, teleop, endgame. What do you guys think for autonomous? What, for a robot to play in the game and be contributing, what should it do in autonomous?
Score.
Okay, so score.
One little thing.
Yep, score one game piece.
And then hopefully get on the balance.
Okay, so drive up and balance. Excellent.
That'd be really great.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Let's see what, I think I have these set up this way. Whoops.
I think it's animated, yeah.
Oh. Yes. So autonomous would be score a preloaded game piece. So this is what the Everybot team came up with, was score a preloaded game piece, score mobility, which was just drive straight outside of your starting area, as well as dock and engage to drive up and balance onto the charge station. Exactly. Teleop. What do you guys think of teleop? What should a robot be able to do? I don't have a whole lot of people. The rest, so most of the match.
The rest of the match.
Yeah, so after the first 15 seconds where it's pre-programmed, now the drivers drive, so everything up until like the very end of the match.
Well, you want to be able to pick up game pieces
Mm-hmm.
and score.
Yeah.
And dock at the end and like be fast.
Yeah. Any for picking up the game pieces, any thoughts on where they should be able to pick up from?
Well, you have to have because there are three real different, well, two main different. There's like from the ground,
Mm-hmm.
you would get either from the ground or from that station where you drop them out.
Correct. Yeah.
Or that other station where they had the
shelves, the
sliding shelves.
Mm-hmm.
But that can get kind of crowded there. So
True.
I suppose the ground would be the best.
Mm-hmm.
If you were, just being generic.
Sure. Yeah, let's take a look at what the Everybot team said. So they said for scoring was score both cubes and cones in the bottom and the middle. So this should have bottom, middle, and top rows. And they actually put to acquire the cubes and cones from the substation, so from the human players feeding it in, likely so that it could be more predictable, or especially with the cones this year, so many different orientations that they could be in was a challenge. And then they also had to play defense while fully in your frame perimeter, because that's to make yourself more flexible, compatible with other partners. Playing defense is good, but if you play defense and you've got your intake out, you're getting penalties, and then that's not very good defense. Or exactly. And then what about the end game? Which at the very end of the game, what do you guys think? What should we do? Balance. So end game was dock and engage in the charge station, as well as being narrow enough so that you're not like, I can balance, but I'm taking up the whole thing, and now my partners can't get on and get any points. Yes. So this was the minimum design requirements that the Everybot team set. And I say minimum because it doesn't mean that this is only what the Everybot is able to do, but this is what they said it should at least be able to do. So we will take a quick look at the 2023 Everybot. So you can see here, right off the bat, you see it scoring that cone like we mentioned, see it driving up and balancing. It's got its intake there to be able to grab cubes. You see it picking up off the shelf, so that double substation. And right there, it just scored on the high cube node. Now you'd say, well, okay, well, the requirement said low and mid. And that's true. They said it only needs to do low and mid. However, in designing, they found that the mechanism they designed could also score up to the top without making it more difficult for teams to manufacture or program or control. And so that's a nice side benefit that they could get more functionality. There's also a shot in there of, like right now they're showing that it's a lot of weight down low, it's stable, it's not tippy. They showed being able to drive into the wall and the intake, pushed back in so it didn't break off if you run into something. And then they're showing the balancing with other robots. So they were able to achieve all of their capabilities. And with the Everybot, they released a whole bunch of resources. So this is just a few snippets. They've got a whole website about it. You can see all the different links that are on there. There's Discord to talk about teams if they have questions about it. There's a full 100-page document that shows every step of the way how you cut out each part, how you assemble it. Right here showing oh yeah, put this bolt in, put the Allen key through this hole, tighten this. Really for any team, if you have zero background, to be able to manufacture it, assemble it, program it. They released a full CAD and code for it so that you can just download the code, load it into your Everybot, and you've got a starting point to go off of. There we see the code and then as well as the CAD. So if your team wanted to, as we'll get to later, right, take this as a starting point and build off of it, you can download their CAD and you don't have to redraw it all. You can start there as a basis.
So as well as Everybot, there's also a couple other programs that do similar but not exactly the same concepts, right? So our first one we're talking about is the RevIon Starter Bot. So as you see a little bit a picture there, this uses a virtual 4-bar and like a claw mechanism to actually grab cubes and cones. It's a little bit different, obviously, than the Everybot where you see like kind of an arm that kind of swings back and forth, right? So you got a couple options as teams here to be able to shop around essentially for what you like and what fits your team. And then obviously, as you see on that bullet point, it can only score. This can actually only score in the mid and hybrid nodes, which are your middle and low, versus the Everybot that can score for all three, right? So, some would be a little bit simpler, maybe a little easier to drive around, but might not be as high of a competitive ceiling, right? So, the video, yeah.
If you click once more, it should go.
Yeah.
There we go.
So this is the video that introduces it, right? So you can see they also have a 6-wheel drivetrain similar to the Everybot. So it's a little bit lower level of
Lower barrier of entry.
lower barrier of entry versus like a swerve drive. Mm-hmm. You see, one of the big difference between this robot and the other and Everybot is actually grabbed from the ground, as I think they show. Yep, so they can clamp down those cones from the ground, which is something that the Everybot just can't do in its base form, right? So that's one of those things that you look at as a team. You do your strategic analysis and see is grabbing cones and keeps from the ground something we value as a team, or we just forget about that and go substation, and that can be done with any game, any concept like this, right? You see, it can only score in those mids. It can't even close to the high nodes, so it'd be pretty hard to even like modify that to make it go high. And then on top of this, this is teams have used this concept, this exact concept, to pretty great success. Team 112, they're from around here. They're from the Midwest. They went to Midwest Regional. They used this base concept to create their robot, and they were picked. They were on the third alliance. Yeah, third alliance at Midwest, the first pick, and they gave every alliance there a run for their money, and they used this concept, right? They modified a little bit. They use a swerve. They use a ground intake, and well as a roller mechanism for their claw. But that virtual 4-bar you see there is something that they really at the core of their design. So it's something that teams do use. Teams have used with great success. All these programs. And then this is another one. This is the West Coast Products Competitive Concept. So this is a little bit different than the other programs. This is less of a something for teams to use, something for teams to copy, and more for teams to like as just a showcase, right? So every mechanism on this robot that you can see here are cost mechanisms. So these can all be bought from West Coast Products. So like that claw is the great claw and the great elevator. So it can be bought from West Coast Products like right now if you wanted to, or I don't know if they're in stock, but so and yeah, and it's a little bit higher complexity than all the other concepts, right? So you see this uses an elevator. It uses a elevator and a laderator, so it can go up and out, score on the high, which is something that is pretty significantly greater complexity than like the Rev or the Everybot. I'll show the video for that one too. So you'll see this is definitely a higher complexity. I believe they use a swerve drive, which is obviously programmatically a much higher barrier of entry there. You see, they even use a pivot on their arm, which is definitely a high level complexity. This is meant more to take concepts from this and actually apply them versus just straight up using this robot as your base.
West Coast started with a few years back when they started was minimum competitive concept, and they very deliberately dropped the minimum off the name with this year's robot.
And then like you can still see that robot there. That is 1323. They're the world champs this year, and this robot, the West Coast robot, uses the same design concept as 1323's robot with their elevator, laderator, pivoting arm, right? So if you know what they look like, their geometry is fairly similar overall to this robot. So it's absolutely a robot that you can see like the design and strategy went into this robot is very valid for a competitive team. You see, can balance. And as
Their favorite at-home charge stations.
It can also, like you said, like similar to Rev 1, it can pick up from the ground, right? It uses rollers, which is something that Rev Robot didn't do, or to the same extent, right? Right. So why build the Everybot, right? So it's about maximizing a limited set of resources. Like I mentioned, it's meant for lower design capabilities, right? So a team that maybe doesn't have a huge budget or doesn't have a lot, or doesn't have the technical abilities. So as you can see, most of the parts on this robot are fairly simple to build. And if you were on Chief Delphi around the time of the release of this robot, you know that, or you see that the plates on the side of the intake, if you look at the end by the cone, are CNC'd parts, but they're actually sold by the Thrifty Bot around that time to get teams these CNC parts that are maybe a little more complicated than a lot of teams could use. As well as that, time is a big deal in FRC, right? A lot of teams, they spend so much time building their robot that they can't actually get their robot, the programming or the drivers with enough time to really practice or really fine tune. So, wait, I thought it was more, but yeah, right. Sorry.
Yep. So I was just going to comment one thing on what Matt mentioned there, that that limited set of resources. Every single team in FRC has a limited set of resources. No team has infinite, right? And each team is different. One team may have more, let's say, financial resources than technical resources, or they may be able to get more time in the shop than another team. And so that's exactly what what Matt was saying, and that really feeds into this Everybot Plus conversation. Is it's about what's the best resources that your team has, and how can you fill in the gaps? This is one of those tools. Whether you can fill it in with a lack of programming or mechanical, or just plain money to spend on pricey swerve drives or all these other mechanisms. Use this as a tool to do that. So Everybot Plus, what is it? It's our like unofficial, just because we're like Apple Plus and all the other Plus people. We're like, let's just plus up the Everybot. And taking the Everybot as your baseline. It's not your ceiling, it's your starting point to then elevate off of. And it should play to your strengths, right? So we just mentioned about the resource conversation. If your team has like a really great design team, you've got a couple students that are really good at CAD and can just make a really cool mechanism. Or you've got a good fabrication team. You've got access to your school's machine shop, so you can make some high precision parts. Maybe you're really good at software, or you've got electrical experience and controls. You can do that sensor. Those are the areas where you can build upon it. But in the areas where you're not so strong, use all those Everybot resources we talked about: the CAD, the code, the Discord, the instructions to start off with. So we looked at the 2023 Everybot previously, right? We saw the big swinging arm out. We saw it, you know, taking the cones and cubes and scoring them. What are some ways that you guys think we could, if we took that as a starting point, how would you, if you had all the resources and time and people, how would you enhance it? How would you build that up? What would you change about it?
Maybe make it so it can pick stuff off the ground.
Okay, so maybe add a ground intake to it. Excellent. What else?
More like the drive, like what are the aspects of the drivetrain, your manipulator, right? Like what kind of things could you add to those core aspects, right?
I'm sorry, I'm new here, so I don't.
So
That's okay. Then you're in the right spot.
it's when we look at some of the other concepts, what do we see on those robots that maybe could be applied to the Everybot, that maybe were shortfalls from the Everybot, but could be help with concepts from like other programs?
um,
There you go.
Drivetrain, like swerve.
You can do swerve. You can make it move sideways. That's a pretty neat feature. That's all right. That's good. So, what are some of those enhancements? First one, drivetrain, right? Swerve is basically like if you would step up that, the six-wheel tank drive is going to be, it's the easiest, but it's also limited. So, swerve is, if you go back 5, 6 years, it was still pretty challenging. Nowadays, with all of the COTS commercial off-the-shelf swerve solutions that are available, it has definitely lowered the barrier of entry, made it easier for teams to get into swerve. In fact, I'd say 99+% of teams that are doing swerve today are using one of the modules either pictured here or another one that you can purchase. Very few teams are actually designing their own swerves. Because of that limited set of resources, you can get something just as good where you just buy it and it works versus and then spend all your other time designing other parts of your robot instead of having to spend all that time designing the swerve. So here's a handful of examples. So West Coast Products has their Swerve X, Swerve Drive Specialties. This is the Mark IV-i. They've got a few different models. Rev this last year came out with their Max Swerve. So all three of these were used to great success on robots this season. Go ahead.
Was swerve used on any of the Everybot designs, like because of where that? Because you're mounting in the corners for that Everybot design.
Yeah.
Does that yeah, so that's my real question. I know that when we did the Everybot, not last year, but the year before, we did a heavier, the pneumatic tires.
Yep.
So we had to modify that Everybot design in order to work with where we could fit it in the robot.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll in a couple slides we'll touch on a team that did do that. Um, but a lot of the with the way that Everybot itself is designed and some of these standard ones um, is uh, is meant to be kind of on top of, let's say, the six-wheel drivetrain that comes in the kit of parts. And so that um, trying to make it, the designers make it more standardized to, okay, here's just kind of a flat drive base, and I'm going to just mount the whole superstructure on top of it, um, makes it easier to then convert. Um, so, for example, one of the last bullets on here, right, is that all of these swerve drives are meant to just bolt onto a 2x1 aluminum frame. And so that gives you now, again, like you said, basically outside of the corners where you're going to have your modules. Everywhere else is just here's a flat piece of aluminum, here's a big square or rectangle, all the way around that you can then bolt your superstructure to on top. Absolutely. So with the Swerve, there's a lot of software resources out there, which is great. They used to be one of the biggest headaches. Now it's you just go download from any of these people, or a ton of teams have released, libraries that make it really easy to get your Swerve up and running. Um, if your team is able to, definitely, even with these being off the shelf, the recommendation is to, purchase a set early, spend time in the off season, in the summer, in the fall, just getting the hang of it so that by the time you get into build season, you understand how to get a swerve drive up and running, you understand the controls to it, you're familiar with maybe putting the modules together. Again, it's going to depend on each team, the resources, the time they have available, the money, but definitely basically after COVID, the number of teams using Swerve has skyrocketed, and so it's a great that there's off-the-shelf resources, and highly encourage if teams are able to do that. Intake enhancements as well. So exactly what you mentioned, right? How can we plus up the Everybot? Make it so that it can pick game pieces up off the ground. Um, so this photo here shows one that's actually it's a separate mechanism. So part of that Everybot is, they've got that big arm and they've got the intake out top. Well, if you try to make that arm now also reach down to the ground, that's a pretty intense, big changes. You're adding more mechanisms. It's getting more complicated. Instead, kind of throwing back to the 2018 Everybot that we saw, it just had like a separate mechanism to do the ground intake. So, if you can add a separate mechanism, two simpler mechanisms that maybe just hands off to one another is going to be easier. You're going to have fewer chances for like a design problem to totally break it. And you can then have that success versus one mechanism does everything. You could also try upgrading the intake. I'll say that the Everybot intake this year was pretty solid. It was a good intake, and a lot of teams, really, really good teams, had a very similar style with rollers to intake the top of the cube, or excuse me, the top of the cone, a bigger intake to grab the cubes out. Um, but you could try, maybe side-by-side wheels, or try a pincher, or try something else. Um, and ideally is, leveraging the resources for the Everybot, the CAD designs that if you can say, all right, here's where it bolts on. I'm going to make my new intake bolt on the same way. So I can take off the Everybot intake, try my new one out. If it doesn't work, I'll just bolt the old one back on. And it allows you to iterate faster. Software enhancements as well. So automation is key, right? That Everybot, their minimum requirements was autonomous. They just said score your game piece and drive out, or score and get up onto the charge station. But especially if you, let's say, have a ground intake, now you've got an ability to go get a second game piece. So using things like pose estimator, path planner, we've done other presentations on that in the past. You can make a more advanced autonomous routine so you can score, drive out, grab a piece, drive back, score again. Um, there's also vision tracking solutions. So April tags, the QR code looking things on the field, use those for automatically, let's say, aiming yourself to pick up or to place the game piece. Makes it easy. Um, and then automating, just further actions. So maybe by default, you have to push the joystick and you got to kind of eyeball what height you're going to be at in order to score your cone or cube. Well, if you can add some sensors and automate that process of go to this spot, can speed up your cycle time and get you more game pieces each match.
So this is like we talked about earlier a little bit. This is a team that really had a lot of success using the base concept of the Everybot itself. Team 1591, they're the Greece Gladiators, had a pretty major breakout year in 2023. This is I believe, their first regional win this year, and they did it twice. They won the Greater Pittsburgh Regional and the Finger Lakes Regional. Um, at Pittsburgh, they were the first pick of the first alliance, so it wasn't like a second pick. Kind of, it was a first pick. They were major contributors to their alliance offensively. So a couple of their advancements, they used the ground intake like we talked about earlier. It was actually that picture was actually their ground intake. So they used that. They flipped it down and they grabbed the cubes and actually passed it off to their big arm, so they could grab it and score it high, or they could actually shoot it, which they did in autonomous. That was kind of a cool thing. So they also used swerve drive. That was one of the more simpler in concept enhancements, but it really helped a lot versus like a tank drive. I believe they use it says they use MK4i. I believe they actually use the Rev swerve Rev Max swerve. So yeah, and then they also won the autonomous award at their regional. And on top of that, they were actually the first pick of Alliance 7 on Galileo. So they were up there in at Worlds even too. And on Statbotics, they were in 40th in the world and first in New York. So they're really up there and competitively. And then cool fact, they're part of the alliance that has the highest scoring qualification match, official match in the world. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. And here's a video of a match with them. This is at the Greater Pittsburgh Regional. So, and I'll point out some of the stuff they do.
Full disclosure, we played with them, but we didn't pick them just because, or didn't showcase them here just because we were friends with them.
So you can see it flips down, and they grab their cubes, and you actually see they're gonna shoot that. So that's a cool autonomous program. Yep. And then I think they would shoot it if they missed that one, unfortunately. But you'll see, I think they go grab this one right here. So, and then you can, so they do that. There you go. And then they'll pass it off and score it up high, right? And as you see the swerve drive, they're zooming around, sideways, spinning around, avoiding defense is a big part of swerve. And then you see everything else with their arm, with their manipulators, all Everybot, basically what the Everybot was. So they go from the substation, score it, and obviously with using this design, it can be pretty likely they were able to help get it out and done really quickly, which allowed their drivers to get really, really good. You see they're pretty spot on with their drives and their scoring. And you see that's why they're so good this year, right?
One of the things in that Everybot release video that we saw, right, was them the Everybot with all the weight down low to have a low center of gravity to avoid being tippy. And Grease Gladiator is able to continue that even with their swerve drive down low, but leverage the design that's already meant to be stable, right? You don't have to maybe get your robot built and then find out, we put too much weight up top and it's tippy, and now we got to change it. They could kind of move forward knowing that it's lightweight up top, low center of gravity, allows for confidently stepping up with swerve, faster motors, faster driving without being unstable.
How much of the Everybot did they really use?
So
the whole top part, basically the entire top, the arm, the gripper, all of that stuff is the same as the Everybot.
Yeah, I mean, if you see their robot, I'm pretty sure that their major structure and their intake is the basic Everybot.
So like from that top part, that whole arm moving to Everybot.
That's how the Everybot was done.
Yep.
Yep.
But it looks like they modified the tops, like the part that goes up to that top, right?
They may have modified it a little bit just to perhaps to go with their ground intake, but they built it to the spec of the Everybot for the arm, the gripper, everything else.
Motion to be able to.
Correct. Yeah, that kind of retract and then go all the way out there. Absolutely. And then yeah, really it's just the bottom part there that was with the swerve and then the ground intake on it.
So yeah, so along with Everybot, especially for the official First is coming out with an official 2024 Kit Parts robot. This is from First in the Kit Parts. So in the past, the Kit Parts robot was just a drivetrain, a basic drivetrain that was easy to set up. Now they plan on actually releasing a full robot for the 2024 season and beyond. And it was actually inspired by 118's Everybot. So um, so it's really cool that a program like that could inspire change in First itself. So it'll include a base robot with specific to the 2024 game. So it's not just like a generic like drivetrain or just a generic mechanism. Um, yeah, and yeah, that'll help. The goal of this is to help raise or lower the competitive bar, right? So even with the Everybot, teams don't always have access to those resources. They need to learn about it first, and it doesn't come from the official First like resources. So it is advertised to all teams and it's really easy to access.
What comes in that then?
So the kit itself will include most of the like any specific materials, but I know that First is following. For example, they had team registrations and kit of parts like opt out. So some veteran teams, opt out of the kit of parts and they can get a voucher instead. First did describe that they said, hey, veteran teams, even if you want to build this, you'll probably have most of the parts, and anything else is you can go to the hardware store, go to Home Depot, go to Ace Hardware, go to something to buy it. So it's definitely, First has in mind teams that are lower resource, don't have a lot. That's who they're making sure the robot can be built by those teams.
So would it be coming with like 1x2s or?
It's an excellent question. I don't know if it will have those. I would assume that would be part of, or it'll work in conjunction with the typical kit of parts drivetrain that has been provided in years past. My guess is that it's basically that plus then the additional scoring mechanism and the other parts of it. But we'll have to see on kickoff.
So we don't know.
Correct.
What that actual expanded kit will be.
Correct. So all of that
information. Is that different from the regular?
I think they're basically morphing the kit apart robot, the kit apart drivetrain that's been provided in years past is now becoming this. There's still the standard kit of parts that's got batteries or
right.
the signal light, all those pieces. But it's just the kit apart drivetrain that teams previously have gotten, and it's really just the drive base. Now we'll also for teams that are opting to still receive that will receive additional materials to build this. And it's my understanding, so there's a website for this on the First website, and they're like on kickoff will be, I think, analogous to like the Everybot website where it was here's the CAD, here's the code, here's the building instructions. All of that stuff will be released right away day one kickoff, so that teams can then go to there, and it's not going to be, from what I understand, it's not like here's a Lego set, plug it all in, and it's done. And there's still a little bit of, cut this to length, drill some holes, but it's designed for basic tools that a team would have.
And, advantages like this versus like the Everybot or any other concept is that Everybot, they get it done fast, but it's still a week after build season, right? That's valuable time. If you just wait for the Everybot, that's valuable time you're kind of spending, right? Versus the Kit Bar, that's probably already being worked on, being done already. It'll be released day one. Yeah, it'll be released day one. You can get building, get programming, get strategizing immediately. They kick off day one kickoff, right? So, all right, here's a recap. So, I really want to really reiterate that the Everybot is a concept that can be used by anybody. It can be used by any team, any level of competitiveness for many reasons, right? It can be used just certain aspects or the whole concept, right? So like Team 930 this year, we actually early on we actually built an Everybot intake for our robot. It never saw the field or anything, but we used it to get a really quick prototype in. We used it to early conceptualizing, right? It ultimately didn't fit all our needs, so we ended up putting it aside and using our own, and then using wild things concept, but it is something that we definitely use. And if you go locally, I believe 6574 used a similar concept to Everybot. So like you can definitely use not just the entire thing. Any team can use any part of the Everybot concept. You know. Yep.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll say, what Matt said is that really this is Everybot can be or the FRC kit or parts bot can be that doesn't have to be the ceiling. That can be the floor that you then build off of for any type of team. So we're a team that we've got some decent resources. We're planning on building that FRC or that kit or parts robot because it's on day one. First is giving us a design for a robot to play the game. So we're using that kind of twofold. One is for our rookies and our younger students to like really own that. It gives them more hands-on experience, gets them in, and then at the end of let's say the first week, we've got a robot that plays this game. We can do drive practice. We can test out different mechanisms. We can get some strategy figured out. Start running cycles back and forth. When we have our full competition bot built later in the season, now we've got something to play defense, to do alliance strategies. So it's a super useful tool, as well as like Matt mentioned, right? The Everbot stuff, we tested that out. We always look at that, all the robot in 3 days, all the resources, because no idea shouldn't be looked at for that. So, all right, I think that's what we've got. Any other questions, comments from you guys? Anything we went over?
The 2022, 2022 Everybot. That was my first year as a mentor.
Okay.
And
With what team?
6643.
Okay.
And we used the Everybot, and one of our students was doing the ordering of materials, ordered steel.
Ooh.
And
heavy.
Aluminum, and then we didn't buy enough, so we had half aluminum, half steel. It was very cattywampus and everything like that. Like we failed pretty bad with that, and we had to add like surgical tubing.
Sure.
On the upright thing.
Sure.
To try and to counteract that, to lift it up. Like so, materials are like when you're following those directions, you want to make sure that. And I found that the directions that we got in that kit were kind of confusing.
Okay.
They looked a little, I don't know, like it was a little harder to follow, but
Sure.
I don't know. I think being my first year, it wasn't a good example of like everything.
Sure.
So I was kind of thrown into that one.
Absolutely.
And, like there are definitely varying levels of competitiveness. 2023's Everybot was like I'm pretty sure pretty objectively the most competitive Everybot you could build. If you look back at all the other concepts, it's all low goals, lower scoring. But like Everybot can score high, everything, and I think that's kind of where Everybot's going is being a higher competitive level, especially with the kit of parts bot coming out. You don't want just like these two the same things, right? I suspect that the Everybot will be looking at more high level concepts than previous years.
Is that kit of part thing, is that already passed? Or is that something that can still be?
For the opting in and out.
Yeah.
That has passed, but I believe it's that you'd have to go to opt out. So if you didn't do anything, you're gonna get it. So.
I was thinking we might have opted out.
But even if not, and we were initially like, oh, maybe we should opt in if we plan to build it. That's where it first came out and said, hey, a lot of teams you'll be able to just build this with what you've got. So yeah, definitely. Now with first.
It's if you didn't opt out, it is that whole thing. It's that extra above the drivetrain, right?
Correct. Yes, I believe it's the whole thing together. So. All right. Well, thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Our info's up there if you want to reach out at all. But appreciate your time.